War is hell, wherever it happens. In the case of the Vietnam War, there were a large number of unusual and impressive situations that all the people who were involved in it had to go through, even civilians, from feeding problems to torture. Storms of flames that fell from the sky, stories of spies, and even friendly fire were part of the menu of this extraordinary conflict. In today's video, we are going to share with you some of the most inhumane and tortuous things that happened throughout this armed conflict. Prepare for a trip to the 1960s in one of the most hostile and difficult territories on the planet. Welcome once again to Military History. Operation Vinh Wiretap: Secrets Intercepted in Vietnam. In times of war tension, no one can feel safe from being intervened by a government agency. All information is valuable, like gold, and sometimes there are no ethical limits to obtaining it. In the midst of the confrontation, the CIA was the protagonist of an intriguing plot known as Operation Vinh Wiretap from December 1972 to May 1973. The plan focused on intercepting North Vietnamese communications, providing crucial military information to the American diplomat Henry Kissinger. Given the intense surveillance on the borderlines, the strategic decision was to intervene in a military multiplex line in the heart of Vietnam, near Vinh. Stealth was essential, and the CIA turned to a modified helicopter called the Silent One. This Hughes 500P, enigmatically black and considered the most soundless in history, became the primary tool for eavesdropping on Viet Cong conversations, planning, and decisions to obtain other crucial intelligence. The backdrop of the operation dates back to the Laos Civil War, where the CIA had attempted to install wiretaps on Vietnamese communist lines in 1966, but the locals had resisted the infiltration fiercely. The preparation was meticulous. 2 Hughes OH-6 Cayuse helicopters were transformed into the stealthy 500Ps, and a rigorous training program was put into place. Nationalist Chinese pilots were trained to add a layer of deception and staging in case the mission failed. However, challenges and disagreements led to the exclusion of the Chinese and American pilots were relied upon to carry out the mission. The operation, scheduled for October 1972, was delayed due to technical failures. Finally, on December 6th, the group Quiet One successfully took off. Flying at low altitude and avoiding anti-aircraft positions, the helicopter stealthily approached its target near Vinh. There, Laotian commandos descended, installing wiretaps in the darkness. Despite the setbacks, the operation was a success. From then on, during the peace negotiations in Paris and until May 1973, the wiretap constantly transmitted vital information to the United States. Henry Kissinger considered her a case of excellent intelligence. However, the eavesdropping went silent in May 1973 due to a technical failure in the spy devices. Attempts to replace the damaged part failed, and the mission came to an end. After hearing this, you must be thinking the following. In the middle of war, there is not a moment to relax. Something is always happening. And it's true, the soldiers couldn't even eat their food rations in peace. Let's move on to the next curiosity. CRAT. Poorly fed militias. It was to be expected that there would not be a chef from a luxury hotel in the middle of a military camp in the middle of the jungle in Saigon or Laos. However, the alternative available to the US military was too rudimentary. The infamous sea rations, known among soldiers as CRAT, were the only sustenance they had packaged, was the little they had during jungle patrols, upriver crossings, and in remote outposts in the middle of nowhere. They could choose between the 12 options offered by the CRATs and received a random dish. Each kit came with a unique mix of canned meat, fruit or cake, crackers, and spread in its packaging. Let's see an example of one of these original packs. As we just saw, what transformed each CRAT into more than just food was the small survival pack that accompanied it. Gum, cigarettes, coffee, or toothpicks were part of the package. and were generally what soldiers valued most. Most of the items were old rations, which turned an already unattractive meal into real rubbish. Fighters, unhappy with their quality, often found alternative uses for the cookies, turning them into throwing cards or frisbees, unless they desperately needed the nutrients. Barter also became common currency on the battlefield, where C rations were exchanged for more precious goods, such as beer and cigarettes. However, the most astute of the soldiers avoided smoking, as they knew a dark secret. Smoking during night patrols could be a death sentence. In the dark night, the light of a lit cigarette was an invitation to snipers, and too many soldiers lost their lives to the reckless orange ember that gave away their position in the shadows. Another valuable artifact present in the C-Rat was without a doubt the favorite tool of the military. We are talking about the irreplaceable P-38 can opener. Small in size but colossal in utility, the modest device, affectionately known to troops as John Wayne, was conceived by the ingenuity of Major Thomas Dennehy. Initially designed for military use in 1942, the P-38 became a faithful companion from World War II until the 1980s, finding its place in the canned field rations of the United States Armed Forces. It is rumored that the name comes from the number of perforations, P, necessary to release the contents of a can of field rations using this ingenious instrument, 38. This small device, beyond its primary function, became a cutter of cloth and wire, or a screwdriver, proving to be the most versatile tool given to the troops in that scenario of chaos. Thus, between the harsh reality of C rations and the stealthy danger of smoking in the dark, the soldiers had the comfort of John Wayne. In the middle of the battle, where even the choice of a meal or a cigarette was a fine line between life and death, the enemy was not the only one that generated lethal danger in the North American ranks themselves. Fragmentation, fragged for friends. The Vietnam War years were turbulent. The feeling of patriotism and duty with which the conflict was faced was in crisis. A unique and dangerous phenomenon arose in the ranks of the U.S. military known as fragging. This term refers to the act of attacking a superior in the chain of command with the intention of frightening him or even ending his life, using, in most cases, fragmentation grenades, an action from which the name comes. The use of these lethal weapons to intimidate or eliminate officers was strategically intended to make identification of the perpetrator difficult, especially amidst the chaos of the battlefield. In the early days of the war, the United States Army remained firmly convinced of the necessity of conflict, exhibiting unity and discipline. However, as the conflict dragged on, ethics and obedience crumbled. This decline was replicated in American civil society, which observed the horrors of combat transmitted by the media. Two events in the late 1960s would mark the progressive decline in morale and increasing irritability among the troops. The first was the decision of the Nixon administration to gradually withdraw the militias, although in practice, men were still sent and human losses continued. The second, just as important, was the assassination of Martin Luther King, which sparked racial violence. The unrest of American society filtered to the front lines, where official orders began to be questioned and disobeyed. Desertions arose. Racial militancy generated distrust among African Americans, and thus began the phenomenon of fragging. The potential victims were incompetent senior officers who put their subordinates at risk, fanatics or suicides who, in search of glory, dragged down their troops, and openly racist captains. At first, the warning was manifested in the form of a grenade placed on the bed of the targeted person, and if he persisted in his attitude, he was eliminated. Fragging cases ranged from individual acts to elaborate conspiracies. Sometimes the fraggers acted alone, driven by an explosive mix of desperation and pent-up resentment. In other cases, groups of soldiers joined together in a dark pact of resistance, creating a clandestine network of discontent that spread through the ranks. The devastating testimony that we are going to share with you demonstrates the spirit of resigned soldiers, which later led them to commit these actions.
I couldn't see any purpose in the war back home. It never explained to me why we're actually here. And I really had nothing against these people. I want to kill them. And you go out in the woods and they'll shoot at you first. You'll see them, they'll shoot you if they get the chance. You have to shoot at them first. It's really bad. I still don't know why I'm here. That's God's truth. 3 months and I don't know why I'm shooting these people.
Between 1970 and 1971, there were 363 cases of explosive devices directed against American officers in Vietnam. Although most of those responsible were never identified or punished, 71 cases of soldiers convicted of these crimes were documented. It should be noted that the official episodes are probably only part of the total, given that in the heat of combat and the clandestine nature of these acts, these practices generally went unnoticed. Fragging emerged in the context of an unpopular war, with low troop morale, drug abuse, racial tensions, and the uprising of American youth. In a war conflict, in which the dispute over human rights and youth rebellions made the militias make these types of decisions, there were some poor souls for whom no one raised their voice. Tiger cages, prisoners in animal captivity. 180 kilometers off the southern coast of Vietnam, in a remote corner inhabited by barely 5,000 people, lies a small archipelago of 15 islands known as Con Dao. Behind its serene appearance lies a dark part of history linked to the prison complex established in the early 19th century by the South Vietnamese government. In this seemingly paradisiacal corner, the great heroes of the Vietnamese Revolution suffered inhumane conditions and unimaginable torments, scorching sunbaths, merciless beatings, electric shocks, and, without a doubt, the most feared part of the complex by the inmates were the infamous tiger cages. Built in 1940 to house nearly 2,000 political prisoners, these cages were strategically located outside the prison, hidden in plain sight. There were 120 cells so narrow that the prisoners barely had room to stand. The ceilings, made of bars, allowed guards to beat prisoners with long bamboo sticks, treating them like beasts. Quicklime and water were thrown at them, inflicting severe burns on their skin. These brutal practices were not confined to the Vietnamese government, as during the Vietnam War, the United States forces joined in these brutalities. The prisoners, marked by suffering, raised their voices to denounce the abuses and torture that were tearing humanity apart in that gloomy room. It was not until 1970, when President Nixon sent a delegation of 10 congressmen to Vietnam to investigate peacekeeping, that these atrocities came to light.
They refer to them as prisons, but they really were torture chambers. They had American advisors in the prisons, American military who were aware of the conditions, and they really were kept a secret. The horrors of what was going on there were kept a secret. And in 1970, a U.S. government delegation came to see what was really going on there.
Clandestine information, like whispers of the truth, guided their steps, revealing a desolate panorama. The prisoners were subjected to inhuman torture, an insufficient diet, and the cruel weight of chains and dumbbells on their battered feet. The testimony of one soldier is as illustrative as it is heartbreaking. During that time, not a single day passed without us being hit at least once. They opened the cages and used wooden sticks to throw meat at us from above. They dragged us and beat us until we lost consciousness. Despite the deplorable living conditions of local and foreign prisoners, in the specific case of this conflict on Vietnamese lands, those who were fighting on the battlefield bore the brunt of it. For napalm, rains of fire fall from the sky. In the gloom of the Vietnam War, napalm emerged as a burning nightmare, an incendiary scourge that left an indelible mark on local lands as well as its combatants. The American soldiers were not exempt from terror, since many of them were also wounded with this particular combat weapon. Those who piloted the planes from which it was dropped saw the destruction firsthand from above. Many of them maintain that they still have nightmares about their actions, And in extreme cases, they even took their own lives because of having sprayed this compound in Vietnam. Why is this element so lethal and burning? This deadly weapon, composed of gelling agents and oil when released from the skies, transformed into a blanket of liquid fire that enveloped everything within its reach. Without mercy or discernment, this chemical became the merciless executioner of those who found themselves in his path, whether they were Viet Cong soldiers, civilians, or even fellow Americans. The consequences for the enemy were catastrophic and chilling. Vietnamese civilians saw the napalm bombs hit the ground or the trees of the jungle and discovered the infernal spectacle: a maelstrom of flames that consumed bodies, homes, and crops alike. The burning temperatures and persistent adhesion of the incendiary gel turned those trapped in this hell into victims of indescribable torment. This viscous and easily manufactured gasoline is a lethal substance and much more than a simple fuel. It is the result of the addition of a thickener obtained from a mixture of aluminum salts and organic acids, including naphthenic and palmitic acids. The particularity of the mixture, highly flammable, burns persistently and adheres tenaciously to any surface, even in vertical positions when it defies gravity, making putting out its fires extremely complicated. The way in which its burning potential was deployed was through aerial bombs and incendiary cartridges. Direct contact with the human body caused severe burns, often leading to death due to the unbearable pain. The physical consequences were horrific. The skin melted, the lungs felt a burning sensation of suffocation with toxic smoke, and life vanished in the middle of a Dantesque spectacle. But the scars went beyond what was visible. Fear gripped the minds of those who witnessed the fury of napalm, sowing anguish that would last long after the flames were extinguished. In cases of chemical weapons, and in particular gases, it is impossible not to mention Zyklon B, one of the most sinister components, used in one of the darkest moments in the history of the 20th century. Unlike napalm, which burns with unbridled ferocity, Zyklon B was a deadly gaseous compound used during the Holocaust. Conceived to exterminate, it was released into gas chambers to annihilate millions of innocents, mostly Jews. Two advances in science turned into horrors, two forms of devastation, each one inscribed in the collective memory as a synonym for indescribable and inhuman suffering.
Napalm was this hideous jellied gas burning at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It didn't just kill you, it tortured you. It has a complete reference to Zyklon B, the gas they use in the concentration camps. It felt like chemical warfare at its worst.
The military strategies, with napalm in their arsenal, sought to annihilate the morale and resistance of the enemy. By unleashing this infernal fire on villages and battlefields, they intended to break not only the bodies, but also the spirits of those who fought against them. The tactic mainly sought victory in territorial terms, but also sought a psychological victory that would leave indelible scars on the enemy. These weakening strategies came directly from the North American intelligence agencies, commanded by Henry Kissinger. Thus, napalm emerged as a brutal tool in Vietnam, leaving in its wake a destruction that went beyond how effective or devastating it was. It was a stark reminder of the dehumanization inherent in war, a price paid not only in terms of territory, but with the loss of humanity amid the flames of war brutality. It was not until 1980 that napalm was finally banned. This regulation was decided in the United Nations Convention on the Use of Conventional Weapons and its associated protocol on prohibitions on the use of incendiary elements. The story of this chemical weaponry in Eastern lands resonates as a grim echo of the horrors of modern warfare, where the line between military tactics and atrocity has faded into a sea of indomitable fire. The curiosities that we have just shared with you, most of them atrocious, are neither more nor less than the harvest of a fertile soil that is war. Not protecting one's own soldiers by neglecting their food, or one's enemies by torturing them in prisons, are behaviors of alarming apathy. Battle strategies that ranged from spying on enemies to showering them with fire must be unforgivable and a lesson for the future. Above all, because when senior leaders dehumanize themselves, they can run the risk of being executed by their own troops, as also happened in the terrible and unjust Vietnam War. In this way, we are coming to the close of today's impressive video. We thank you for reaching the end, and we look forward to seeing you in the next installments of military history.